To understand that, we need the straight dope on the dopamine pathway. The dopamine pathway is one that always seems to come up in those pesky high school biology classes, somewhere between the frog dissections and that damn Krebs cycle. Alpha, keto, gluta... whatever, I hate that damn thing. Anyway, dopamine is a specialized little molecule that's basically your body's happy hormone. If you happen to feel a sudden burst of happiness after beating a major boss, a wave of excitement when discovering a secret area, dopamine makes us feel happy. Why do we sometimes get bored with our favorite games? Well, one reason we lose that love and feeling about the games we play is desensitization. It's actually the dopamine signaling turning itself off. In any kind of addiction, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or my addiction of choice, Diet Coke, the addict ends up having more and more as time goes by. The first few times you perform the addictive behavior, like drink a Diet Coke, you feel awesome. It's so crisp and cold and clean and has that nice burn in the back of your throat, and it's sweet and acidic all at the same time. Ugh. So good. So instead of waiting a week to have another Diet Coke, you remember how great it was and get one the next day. And you order a large. And you order it without ice because you know that their managers told them to fill that cup with as much ice as possible so that they save money on the soda syrup, you cheapskate. Wendy's, man! You have so much ice in your cups. Anyway, your brain still releases a bunch of dopamine the first few times you do that, but over time it starts to go, hey there, Matt Pat, aren't you drinking a lot of Diet Coke there, buddy? Maybe you ought to order a nice iced tea or something. Try a grape Fanta. Diet Dr. Pepper. And it tells you this by removing or down-regulating some of your dopamine receptors, literally closing them down for business. So with fewer dopamine receptors waiting to catch all your little dopamine molecules making that leap of faith across the synapse, the happiness signal gets weaker. Sure, eventually you'll get as much dopamine intake as before, but it takes a lot longer and you have to drink a lot more Diet Coke to do it. And the time after that, there are even fewer receptors, so the cycle gets worse and worse over time, until basically you have to be drinking Diet Coke around the clock in order to keep up the level of signaling you used to get from a couple of sips. Diet Coke though, which I can get whenever I want, mobile games have the ability to regulate how much you consume, thus preventing you from getting desensitized. And they do this in multiple ways. First, they get you to fly through the introductory levels. Right off the bat, you're receiving rewards, achievements, unlockables. In my first hour with Dungeon Gems, I powered my way through at least 10 dungeons, nabbed no less than 12 new heroes, and leveled up my main a whole bunch. I was unstoppable, and it was amazing. I was swimming in dopamine. This got me invested in the game early, but as it got harder in upper levels, those bursts became more sporadic and unexpected. But rather than feeling discouraging, it made me more excited because each victory felt earned, and the reward was even more satisfying. This is known as a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement, and is the same method that's used in a slot machine. You never know for sure when you're going to win, but when you do, it's incredible, and the designers make sure that you win just often enough to keep you coming back for more. Secondly, and more importantly, Dungeon Gems, Candy Crush, Total Conquest, and more all have mechanics built into the game that limit the length of any one play session. You play a few too many matches or lose a few too many lives and the game forces you to wait a few hours before jumping in again. This means they're cutting you off at times when you're most invested. In other words, you're always left wanting more. By not letting you play, the game actually becomes more rewarding when you're allowed to return. This is all related to what's known as the hedonic treadmill. Basically, that as a person's situation changes, their expectations for happiness change with it. Scott Rigby, gaming researcher and author of the book Glued to Games, video games help us satisfy 3 core needs in our lives: competence, autonomy, and relatedness.
That spells car. Just so you know. Well, it does.
Excellent contribution there, Ronald. In short, CAR is like a significantly lamer version of the Triforce. The first piece is competence. This is the feeling of mastery. It's the sense that you're growing, learning, and progressing. Completionists and achievement hunters, this one's for you. Autonomy, meanwhile, is just that. The sense that you have control over your actions, and, to a large extent, the world around you. People drawn to autonomy-oriented games like uninhibited choices, choosing their own adventure rather than being forced down a set path of experiences, the Skyrims and WoWs of the world. And finally, relatedness, the need to feel like we matter to others and that we're making a contribution to society. Unsurprisingly, these are most exemplified by the multiplayer games. The games we're drawn to, the games we find most fun are those that best fit our individual needs. For example, I'm drawn to platformers, Mario, Sonic, Mega Man. Platformers appeal most to those who seek that first Triforce piece, competence, or mastery. The games I'm drawn to are the ones I'm able to pick up and quickly make progress through, finishing levels, beating bosses, watching my character gain more powers quickly, and seeing myself able to handle increasingly difficult puzzles. The more I play, the more competent I feel.
That would make me relatedness, since so much of my play revolves around engaging with other people. Whether it's playing Left 4 Dead with the Gecko Ninja or Borderlands with my lovely Aki, gaming for me is a social experience shared best by friends.
And I'll take autonomy because that's what's left. You see, it's funny because it's autonomy, but I'm taking it because I have no choice. In all seriousness though, choice in and of itself isn't quite enough to capture a player's interest. The choice a player is given also has to feel meaningful. The player needs to feel as if they have control over their actions and their actions impact the virtual world around them. So say you have a poorly designed fighting game where each character has 45 different moves, but only 1 or 2 of those moves is actually useful. It doesn't matter that you have tons of moves to choose from because you're only ever going to use the 2 good ones. Even though you're given tons of options, there's not much of a choice to make. Also notice that sometimes it doesn't matter if the player is given a choice or not, or if the choices actually had an impact or not. What matters is if the player feels like they were given a choice, or if their choice felt like it mattered. Mass Effect uses carefully crafted dialogue trees to achieve this illusion. This game constantly has the player making choices about what to say or do in certain situations, and some of these choices feel incredibly meaningful to the player, but a lot of the time, behind the scenes, it didn't actually matter which dialogue option the player chose. All 3 of them would yield the exact same result. The player doesn't know that though. It legitimately felt like the player made a good or bad judgment call. Whether or not it actually affected the narrative doesn't matter. What matters is if the player feels like their choice affected the narrative.
And there you have it. When our powers combine, lame Triforce complete.